So, I am an academic, which means I'm not actually working in tech, but I work on the philosophy of technology. In the philosophy department at the university, we have this thing called the philosophy of the future, which is a research strategy, and this is research that's come out of that. So I'm working on self-driving cars, the problems thereof, particularly ethical problems. What is the PanoptiCar? Well, artist's impression. The artist is very bad, it's me playing with clip-on. Some of you will have heard the term panopticon. It's a 19th century prison design that originally came to be used as a term for surveillance culture, surveillance state. And so what I'm going to talk about is self-driving cars as surveillance infrastructure, and a particular nightmare scenario that I have that I'm trying to persuade people in tech that they should be thinking about. Before I get into that, how many of you recognise this image? Yep, cool, that's good. I don't need to explain it in any great detail. The trolley problem is a philosophical thought experiment originally conceived by Philippa Foot in 1967. It's important to remember to cite it because what she was writing about was actually abortion and pro-choice. People forget that when they see this thing, this image, which has become something of a meme, is by Jesse Prince, a contemporary philosopher. And the basic idea is you have a choice where you can let some people die or actively kill someone in order to save them. If you have been paying attention to self-driving cars, tech reporting, you will have seen something I call the self-driving trolley problem. And it goes a bit like this. We have a self-driving car trundling on the road, and a child runs out in front of it. Somebody gets in the road in the way of the car, and the car has to decide whether to hit the child or swerve onto the pavement. Typical example, hit a tree, injuring the passengers in the car. And there's a lot of talk about this. I don't know how much of it you've seen. I have seen a lot of it. I am very, very sick of it. The argument goes something like this. This is a thing that will happen. And I'm on board so far, right? Kids aren't going to stop running out in front of cars magically just because the cars are self-driving. Occasionally, like self-driving car evangelists kind of are surprised by this. But the thing that really I don't buy, that is everywhere in the literature, is the idea that the right thing for the car to do, the thing that we should be aiming to program the car to do, depends on the value of the different outcomes here. So a common example is, should the car value preserving the pedestrian's life over the life of its passengers, because the passengers are consented to the risks in a way that the pedestrians have? That's a common discussion. One that unfortunately appears a lot in the academic literature, I'm ashamed to say, is different kinds of pedestrians. So, should the car prioritise avoiding children if that means hitting an elderly person? Is it better to hit a child than better to hit an elderly person than a child? One I haven't seen, but I'm sure somebody's made it somewhere, would be a kind of public infrastructure versus private property. Is there a higher imperative to hit public infrastructure because private property is a special right, these sorts of things? Someone will make that argument somewhere. But if you buy this second premise as well as the first not a problem, second premise is a bit of a problem. The self-driving car is going to need to know a lot about its environment. It's going to need to be able to tell how old people are in this environment. As we'll see, some of the examples that involve other information as well. It might need to know, who owns what bits of infrastructure in the environment. And then the car is going to have to do something like making a decision, making a value judgment about the things in its environment. And that's the bit I really want to oppose, that we should have robots making value judgments. Self-driving car is a robot, my roboticist friends assure me. Before I get into that though, can I have a show of, how many of you drive, quickly? Most of you, okay. Show of hands then, how many of you think that the car should swerve in this situation? Bad news first, all of you with your hands up just failed your driving tests, right? If this happens on your driving test and you swerve, that will be an instant major in this country. What should you do? Magic word, emergency stop. Rule 118 of the Highway Code. In an emergency situation, I can't quite verbatim, in an emergency system, stop the car as quickly as possible without losing control. Okay? And sometimes this is kind of taught as, well, this is the best way to manage your reactions. It's the simplest thing for a human being to do in this situation. We don't want you wasting time thinking about this, just get the car stopped. It's not actually the case. The reason for the emergency stop procedure being defined the way it is physics. It's vehicle dynamics. It's about your car tyres having limited grip. I'm going to talk about this as a traction budget or grip budget. There's a limited amount of grip, and you've got to decide what you spend that on. Okay? If you exceed that budget, you're going to spin out of control. If you are already braking, which you should be in an accident situation, and you start turning the steering wheel, that's adding force to the tyres. It's spending more grip budget. You go over your grip budget, you spin out of control. The car that's spinning out of control is a very bad thing. You want to avoid that. Even if you manage to keep it within the grip budget, you're still spending grip on turning rather than on braking, which means whatever you hit, you're going to hit faster. You're going to hit harder. Now, high-speed impacts, you probably remember, most of you, the ad campaign, if you hit me at 40 miles an hour, there's an 80% chance I'll die. If you hit me at 30, there's an 80% chance. That's an oversimplification. And actually, fatality rates, even at 40 miles an hour, aren't as bad as 80%. Particularly these days, car safety engineers do good work. But a high-speed impact is a much more dangerous impact, and especially at urban road speeds, which is the speeds at which children are going to be running out in front of cars. A little braking makes a huge difference to safety. If you can get down from 20 to 17, it's a huge difference to the safety of a pedestrian. 30 to 25, big difference. And, this is a slightly morbid thought to have, cars are designed to make head-on collisions safe. Right? The reason that we have these kind of soft, round car front ends these days is because they soften the impact on pedestrians. You hit a pedestrian lower, legs are less, and injury to the legs is less likely to kill you than injury to the body. If, God forbid, you have ever been in an accident where a car went into a pedestrian, you will have seen that pedestrians normally are kind of picked up and rolled out of the way. All that does is it reduces the amount of force that goes straight into the pedestrian's body. And most car accidents are very survivable for that reason. There is an exception to this, which is SUVs. If you drive an SUV and you don't need to for reasons of a driving posture issue, a disability issue, please sell it and get a car that is lower to the ground. The rise of SUVs over the last 9 years, is the statistic I know, in the US has been linked to a 46% increase in pedestrian fatalities. Sell your SUVs. Final point on this, other drivers, good message for today, I guess. Other drivers are expecting you to stay in your lane. Those of you who drive will have had the experience where you are trundling along, ordinary driving state, where you're doing a lot of this kind of semi-consciously, right? You're sort of in the zone, a lot of it is happening semi-autonomously. Somebody swerves, and your blood runs cold, suddenly you're in a panic-adjacent state, and that can make you behave erratically. So a car that swerves is not just dangerous to the things in its immediate environment, it's dangerous to things in the environment that you drive that it might distract. So, don't swerve, right? If you're in this situation, don't swerve. If the self-driving car is in this situation, don't swerve, because swerving is dangerous. It's much more dangerous than just doing the emergency stop. Okay, this one is a slight variation on the scenario, and it's really the thing I want to get to talking about, or brings up the thing I want to get to talking about. So this is a composite of two different examples from the academic literature. Same situation, it's now a two-lane road, just so that the example works. So the car is in the right-hand lane, not in the oncoming traffic lane. There's a child who's run out in the way in this lane. In the other lane, a drunk adult has just staggered into the road. And again, the car has to make a decision. Should the car hit the child or swerve and hit the drunk adult? And so the drunk adult comes from a Fiona Woolard example. The age difference between these two comes from a Patrick Lynn example, although actually loads of examples Patrick Lynn states it most clearly. And it is there to put a kind of thumb on the scales of your moral intuition, right? You're supposed to, when you read this, go, well, it's the drunk adult's own fault that they're there. They deserve to shoulder all the risks. Whereas the children who don't hold responsible for their actions, so the car should prioritise hitting the drunk adult. Okay? I don't know whether the room as a whole buys that angle. I'm going to argue that it's a really bad angle. Okay? Problem one, how does the car know that the adult is drunk, right? How is a car going to... How many of you think you can tell that someone is drunk by looking at them? Right answer. You're getting wise so much right. I think if I asked this at a different event, I'd get a bunch of hands up, right? Fair to say? Can you tell whether someone is drunk just by looking at them? I put this in a paper, by the way, this argument, and I got a reviewer feedback saying the car will be able to tell whether or not people are drunk using image recognition, yeah? Just from its ordinary video cameras. To which I said, I haven't put this in the response yet, I'll have to do that next week. The key issue is whether you can tell the difference between somebody who is drunk and staggering and somebody who is disabled and staggering, somebody who's ill and having a dizzy spell. There are loads of things that produce visually indistinguishable behaviour from being drunk. Even if it's due to alcohol, you don't actually know, right, that the person put the alcohol in their own system. Maybe they was fine. Only reliable indicator of blood alcohol content is a blood test. And clearly the car is not blood testing everybody, right? And it's not going to breathalyse people either. Fun fact, if you get breathalyzed at roadside, the breathalyzer that police have in their cars, the portable one, not admissible in court, doesn't meet evidentiary standards. It can serve as a basis for arrest, but if they want to have a court-admissible breathalyzer, they've got to take it down to the station and use a more complex device which isn't portable to have something that is proof beyond reasonable doubt. Even then, they have some false positive issues. Well, how's the car going to get this information if it can't blood test you? The only scenario I was able to come up with to make this plausible is we all start wearing sophisticated kind of biomonitors, right? Which lots of people want you to do that. Particularly, I know this is a huge problem in America with kind of health insurers wanting everybody to be wearing biomonitors and stuff. This would have to be fairly sophisticated ones who's doing blood tests on you all the time. But then the car is reading information from your biomonitor somehow. And I hope I don't have to explain why that's a bad idea. That's a lot of data flying around, some of which will be very, very personal, very intimate. And we're not just talking about like a one-off case here. For this to work, the car's got to have that information as a matter of course. If we're going to program these cars to handle this information, it can't just start handling that information the instant a child runs out in front of you. It's got to have that information already, because information transfer takes time. Information accumulation and processing take time. So we've got to have a situation where everybody's wearing one of these things by law, and by law, every one of these monitors is sending all that biodata to everyone else in the environment. Every other robot agent in the environment that might have to make a decision has to have access to all this. Security nightmare. Problem two, really where the meat of this is, should the car be making these kinds of judgments? Lots of people in the established academic literature seem to think that yes, it's a good idea for us to program robots to make these kind of judgments. It's exciting that robots are going to be making judgments like human beings do. And this actually, I'm using drunkenness as a really good example of how difficult the practical problems are. But it goes for age just as well. If your argument is going to be, well, old people have less life ahead of them, so their lives are less worth preserving, seems to be the rhetoric. There are some really horrible consequences of that attitude. Okay? Not everybody has the same life expectancy. Should a child of 15 with a degenerative disease, because they don't have a long life expectancy, be less valuable than a healthy person of 50? Academic philosophers do this, right? Where they stand up at conferences and say, oh yeah, we just have to calculate the number of life years that you can expect from someone, and it's morbid, it's gross, it's horrible, but that's unfortunately the environment in which I work. And I try to speak up when I can, it doesn't always go over well. But even if you buy the idea, right, that a drunk adult deserves to get hit, you're then saying not only does the drunk adult deserve to get hit more than the child, you're also saying it's worth all the risks of swerving to achieve that we went through, right? It's worth the risk that the car spins out and actually hits both of these people, which clearly isn't an optimal solution. And the other thing with these kind of case studies is they lure you into putting yourself in the driving seat, in the agent position. lots of thought. Ethical thought experiments are about what do you think you should do. They put you in the position of privilege. Yeah? Although exactly how the concept of privilege relates to being a self-driving car is complicated, but they put you in the driving seat, and that's a position of privilege. So you also have to think, even if you're holding out on all this stuff to this point, you have to think, well, come back. If you're standing at roadside and a child has run out into the street, are you happy for the driver of a car to swerve and hit you because you are an adult and that's a child? And you put the question that way, and suddenly people are less keen on this idea. Suddenly when it's people's own lives under threat, their value systems seem to change a bit. So that equips me to go through the nightmare scenario. Okay? So the nightmare scenario, let's imagine that we, meaning self-driving car engineers, satisfy themselves that they have a way to provide cars with all this information that is reliable and consistent and so on, secure. We've still got to train these vehicles to use that information, right? It's probably going to be a machine learning system, it's probably going to need a training data set. And because we're talking about an information-rich environment, we're talking about masses and masses of data about people's ages, intoxication states, who owns what in the environment. It needs to be a big data set. And it can't just appear out of thin air. It's a problem in machine learning. Where are we going to get these data sets from? And I can just see some engineers at Google or Uber or whatever going, well, you know what? The biggest extant database is going to be traffic case law, right? Which has the advantage that we already know that it's supposed to be giving the right answers. A couple of you winced, right answer. Right? But roughly speaking, you want the car to line up with the law, and the law says these are the things you do. So what you do is you take the case law, you encode it in some way that the machines can understand, and then you tell the car, do the things where the driver was declared innocent, and don't, yeah, sure. Don't do the things where the driver was declared guilty. You know, it's not hard to imagine engineers doing this based on what we know about what software engineers get up to. And again, I probably don't need to convince this reader of this claim. There's some biases in this data. And when you're talking about rich data, complex data, data with a lot of factors, then bias becomes really hard to scrub. It becomes really, really hard to clean these systems out. And I don't have a specific statistic on this. I've been meaning to find one. It's difficult to get hold of, obviously, because some people don't want you to know it. It is highly likely that drivers who hit white pedestrians are more likely to be found guilty, more likely to be more severely punished than drivers who hit pedestrians of colour. As one example, you know, it probably goes for every visible marginalisation. I think this is the most obvious one, and it's always worth kind of putting race foremost, I think. And what you'll be doing there, if you think self-driving cars should be making value judgments, is you will be teaching them exactly the kind of values that we already know our society has. And that, I submit, is monstrous. Now, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare that's been bothering me since I got into this topic about a year ago. And what I hope I have proved, and I'm waiting on peer review to confirm this, but good that does, is that none of it's necessary, right? We don't need these cars to be making value judgments at all. Intuitive as it sounds to go through all this stuff, it's fine if they just do an emergency stop. They'll be better at it than we are anyway. So, that's it from me. Thank you very much for listening.